No role plays, no conference calls, no BS. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader. This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Hey everyone, this is Chris from Hacking Your Leadership, and on today's guest interview, we're joined by Joe Davis. Joe is a managing director and senior partner at the Boston Consulting Group, where he's led teams for more than 30 years. His new book, The Generous Leader, 7 Ways to Give of Yourself for Everyone's Gain, was released yesterday and is already sitting high on several bestseller lists. Welcome, Joe. Say hi to our audience.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me here, Chris.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show. I read somewhere that while there are stories and insights from throughout your career in this book, that it was your leadership journey and experience during the COVID pandemic that was the impetus for writing it. So the first thing I want to ask you is, was there a moment sometime in 2020 or 2021 where you remember thinking or realizing that the characteristics of successful leadership before COVID were no longer enough?
I'll tell you, I think the moment probably, well, can I use 2 moments?
Yeah.
You asked for one, I know. I always cheat.
Yeah.
I think one moment was actually, I did town halls, which we all did, but they were a little different in those times.
Sure.
And the tools were different. We had Zoom now. And at the second town hall I did, I think it was from my daughter's bedroom, just a fluke. I just picked her bedroom. She was growing it out in the room and had clouds and hearts all over the wall, which was one thing. And one of my oldest daughter had just returned to Germany right as all the planes were shutting down and international travel and everything. So this was quite stressful to us. And then she landed and sent us a note saying her husband back in California has COVID. And no one knew what that meant at that time, you remember. And my other daughter was a nurse at Harborview, which I think was where the first case was brought. I can't quite, but anyway, very early case. And I remember I did this town hall and told that story and choked up because here I am talking about my kids, and just the uncertainty of everything. And the outpouring of, mostly by email and text, of support and wow, you enabled me to let go a little bit and to think about my children, and to cry if I felt like crying, was so powerful that it just signaled to me. It depends, maybe it's by the time in history, but there's more than just the right strategy, the right vision, the right metrics, the right this and that. There's actually people looking for you to connect with them in ways that motivate, inspire them. The second one is pretty telling for me, which is just very powerful, which, this whole concept of taking the other perspectives of another or their lived experience isn't yours. And I was talking to a person at BCG, maybe a second-year consultant or something, and he was on his bed. I said, what are you doing on the bed? He said, well, we have a bedroom and a living room and a little kitchenette. We take off. My wife gets the living room 1 week and I get the bed. Then we switch and I get the living room. She gets the bed. And here I was, I've been at BCG 30 years in a house with a lot of bedrooms. I thought, wow, my experience ain't his or his ain't mine. It was very powerful. And how leadership needs more than just the basics are critical. Got to hit the numbers. We all know that. But if you want to inspire, motivate people to help you get there, things like understanding their lived experience, empathy, sharing a little bit of vulnerability as much as you're comfortable with is so powerful.
I love both those stories. I think they're fantastic. I think you made your career during a time when those qualities weren't ubiquitous or rewarded in a lot of circumstances when it comes to the business world. And in worst case scenario, they were punished. It was seen as weakness, or if a person is doing this, how the heck are they going to hold somebody accountable for the numbers or getting the scorecards right? How have you navigated that in the times when it was not considered a good thing?
Yes, it's funny, Chris, because people who didn't know me said, you're just a tough guy, numbers. So I never lost sight of we have to deliver and we're going to deliver and we're going to grow, we're going to make the numbers. I just believed I could never do it myself. I had some feedback once from my mentor who said, Joe, if I put you and this other person in a room, 4 white walls, no way to get out unless you solve the problem. Now, this can be a little harsh, but he said, you would probably not solve the problem by yourself. You couldn't get out of the room. The other guy would get out of the room every time. But then I said, okay, you have the solution. Now go do it. get it done in an organization, you would get it done 100% of the time. He would never get it done, partly because you know what you don't know, you're willing to be collaborative, you know how to inspire and motivate, etc.
Yeah.
I think there was enough lessons and signals in my life that this worked pretty well. Although people always thought I was a numbers person until they got to know me. It's kind of funny. If you didn't work with me, because I always hit the numbers, I mean, maybe I'm sure I miss sometimes, but
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to criticize somebody for whatever their style happens to be, if the numbers are there, and oftentimes the numbers will get a leader left alone for a bit, but if they're leading in a way that is not the right way in terms of how their people see them, it'll be short lived.
No, I agree. Someone asked me about all the tech leaders of our time, and I won't go into that, but I did. I said, well, you're missing Satya Nadella, and I don't. Well, BCG knows Satya. I don't know Satya personally, but that fellow, he turned around Microsoft with a vision, but then with culture, he changed the culture drastically. Let's talk to each other. Let's open up. Let's admit failures. I mean, all the classic stuff. So maybe he's not like some of the Silicon Valley. Well, I call them technical geniuses. They're geniuses technically. Of course, you can get a long ways. But he actually was one who, used the heart, I guess you might say, also to motivate and inspire. And it was probably required to change that place after the Steve Ballmer kind of tough guy. I'm not a comment on Steve generally, but that was at least the reputation of the place at that time.
The other story example you gave around seeing the employee on their bed and what they said about how them and their wife kind of they take turns in the good space for whatever the meetings were. It is interesting because I think when it comes to a lot of the challenges that leaders navigate in times of challenge, and so not just something like COVID, but if there's an economic downturn and jobs have to be let go, or anything really where the tough conversations happen that no one wants to have but that are necessary sometimes, the ability to not just seem like or say the words that indicate you're in the same boat with this person, but actually that you are in the same boat with them, not that you're just saying it. The difference in the outcomes are just they're astronomical when it comes to how people will pull together for an organization versus how they won't. Just seeing how their leader acts and how their leader believes that they are all in this together or that they're not. The lack of empathy and the flippant nature with which some of these things are done, they just don't go over well. And no matter how many times it happens, the massive transparency available online to be able to see that these things don't go over well, and yet they still seem to happen. It's at best curious to me, and at worst just like baffling to me at why they continue to happen. And there are so many good examples too, so many good examples that are lauded by the public and by social media, that you would think some of these leaders would take a lesson or at least do some research before moving forward.
I had the luxury of talking to Scott Kirby, the CEO of United, during this book, and he was telling me during COVID, he said, well, I'm going to tell the people that I don't know how long this is going to be broken and how long it's going to be. And his team, well, you can't show weakness. You're the CEO. And he said, he just fundamentally disagrees. Well, guys, we don't have the answer. We're going to tell them we have the answer. Then 6 months from now, they'll discover we don't. No, we can show a little bit of humbleness here, a little bit of honesty. No, I don't think as a leader you want to look lost and scared, but there's nothing wrong with displaying, hey, I'm not sure where we're going. We're just going to all go there together and, think hard, et cetera.
I have many years in the retail space in leadership, but started out actually in retail. And the line that is taught now to a lot of basic retail associates that really wasn't taught for the longest time is this concept of, I don't know, but let's figure it out together, right? And so people see through an attempt to imply that you know something when you don't,
right.
Because even if they don't see it the very first time, they'll see it eventually. And once you've lost the credibility, and this is whether you're talking about a sales interaction between an associate and a customer, or a communication interaction between a CEO and a team of people, once they see through that and you've lost the credibility, it's really difficult, if not impossible, to get that back. And so, just saying, I don't have all the answers, but we're trying to find them. We're trying to find the answers, and we'll be transparent. Because the people that you're talking to, they don't have the answers either. So it's not it's not like they're thinking, well, duh, I know the answer. How come they don't
they're
know?
not just testing you.
No, they're not just testing you. They don't know either. And so if you don't know, the weakness doesn't come from not knowing. Weakness comes from not even having a plan to try to figure out, right? You have to at least have something in place to say, these are the next steps, and we're moving forward with this thing based on the information we do have, but it may change. But you'll be the first to know if it changes, because we want to make sure that you're that you're involved in this, because it affects you just as it impacts us.
I bet your weakness also comes a bit from pretending you always know when you don't know, because eventually it's going to crash.
Of course it will. It's a facade.
Right. This goes to the whole concept of vulnerability. And one of my colleagues, I was asking this person about, authenticity and vulnerability. They said, I used to be afraid to say, I don't know. And so I'd be in a team room and I could tell no one knew what was going, we were lost. And they were going to look to me pretty soon and say, what should we do? And I might not know. He said, I would leave the room before I get the question. He said, well, yeah, that's really, how you'd be productive now. He said, finally one time I stayed and said, I don't know either. And he says, like a breath of fresh air. Oh, you don't know either? Oh, none of us know. And then the juices just started flowing because nobody was afraid of anything. And he said it was the biggest eye opener for him. Hey, it was easier to say, I don't know. Although I still struggle to say, I don't know sometimes.
I think a lot of leaders still struggle to say that. But there's no question that, psychological safety just skyrockets in any room where once the leader has it has to be role modeled. Like there is no psychological safety in a room where it isn't role modeled by whoever the leader is. If everybody thinks the leader has the answer, then no one's trying to solve the problem. They're just trying to say what they believe the leader already thinks is the answer. They're trying to figure that out. And that's the wrong problem to solve. And if the leader doesn't have the answer to begin with, then it's an impossible problem to solve. And
utter waste of time.
Of course. So
it's typically all you have.
It's amazing what you can get done once everybody can kind of just look at each other and agree and say, hey, you know what? Nobody here knows the answer. So let's figure this out together. Than people just trying to put forward this appearance of knowing. I think it's funny when it comes to empathy. My wife will sometimes look at Instagram reels, and she'll send me things with the caption. She'll type out the caption, I think this person is spying on me, meaning she'll see something from another young mother who is having trouble keeping things together, right? Whether it's carpools and schedules and illnesses in children and all the things that happen. And for the longest time, no one saw that. And social media was looked at as a negative influence, because all you saw was the rose-colored lens stuff, and you start to look at the aggregate of all the stuff you're seeing, and all you're seeing is, wow, this person got a new car, and this person went on a vacation, and this person is doing all these things. My life is terrible, and that brings you down. And there's this kind of new wave of social media influencers that are gaining a following by the vulnerability, by saying, I don't have my stuff together, and these are the struggles that I have. And then you get people watching this going, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who doesn't have my stuff together. All these other people do too. I feel seen, maybe for the first time, and I'm able to put down this bag of bricks that is self-judgment and believing that I don't deserve to be here, and believing that I'm in the wrong role, and that I've failed as a human being, as a parent and a whatever. It's just really incredible how that can be a force for good as opposed to just a force for bad in the right hands.
Yeah, it's so interesting you said that, because social media, there's a lot of good things, of course,
Sure.
The access and all kinds of stuff, but there's a lot of things that you started. But I actually even think about it. What were the soap operas or the advertisements that my first job was Procter and Gamble? This housewife looked perfect. The kids look perfect. Even back then we were sending things. And then, of course, all the advertisements that you can buy this car, you should look like this. It probably was not just social media. Actually, maybe social media is going to enable us to be more vulnerable, to your point.
Right.
Because a regular person can show their regular life.
Yeah. In your book, you one of the things that you talk about when it comes to what it means to be a generous leader, and you contrast kind of new styles of leadership versus old styles. And I think part of the reason that this was difficult for a lot more people, and still is difficult for some people today, is that it's hard to quantify success on
Yes.
on an Excel spreadsheet or a scorecard somewhere. It's hard for a person to say that leading in this way, that this is the right way to lead because it does this and this and this. Look at the impact of the scorecard. You can only do that in hindsight. You can only connect the dots looking backwards and saying, I did this for this amount of time and look what it did. In order to do that, you have to have the buy-in, or at least the leeway or the freedom from your own leaders to have that time to do that, to say, this is, trust me, you put me in this role for a reason. This is the way that I think it's successful. And then you're asking them to take a risk on you, or a bet on you that the way you're doing it is correct. A lot of people have a hard time doing that because they can't quantify it. It has to be something that is more ethereal as opposed to, 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah. No, you probably saw the book, the Samir Bodis, who's now CEO of Icertis. He said, I was a Wharton guy, numbers, started at Microsoft. It was all delivered. And he was many years ago, so this wasn't such as delivered to. But it was numbers. So then I changed jobs, had my first turnaround I had to do. And I realized, wow, I just can't holler at people and say, hit the number. This thing is broken. It has to change.
Right.
We're not treating our customers right. We're not treating each other right. We're not being honest. He said, we weren't being honest. And so, he said, I just tried something different, honesty, blah, blah. And wow, we turned it around. He said, it was very eye-opening for me. But even then, whatever board that was, had to give him the time. You're right. Well, I guess it worked. And I'm sure it wasn't just, well, actually, he would argue, of course, he still had metrics and all that, but the fact that we started to be honest with ourselves and our customers changed everything, which, is a version of vulnerability.
Yeah.
No, you're right. Someone once asked me, what are metrics you put in place for this? And it's, you struggle like hell to answer that. I mean, BCG is lucky. We have an upward feedback. And it's 360 too, so it's up. But and it's anonymous, so it can be brutal. But you get feedback as a very senior guy every year, and if you get a lot of, we call them red triangles, you're in trouble in our place. But it's not that common to have that kind of feedback. I mean, that's pretty unusual.
Well, it's cultural for sure. You can't just start it going. It'll fail miserably. You have to. The culture will create the tools. The tools don't create the culture.
I agree with you, and I do think things are shifting. Right? I mean, social media changed stuff because now it's all exposed all the time. And someone asked me the other day, well, isn't it that with tough times you need a tough leader? I was thinking about that. And of course, the question is, what does the word tough mean? If it means, but if tough means I can make tough decisions and I can make them fast because you have to.
Right.
But if also it means I can, release myself a bit to engage with my people, which, I think it was Kristen Peck that said over half the employees are millennials. And if you add the Gen Zers now, which are 13 to 26 or something, most of our employees are young people who do, at least now, indicate quite different demands. They're actually asking for more empathy. Now, maybe when they're old enough that they have 3 kids, 2 cars, and a mortgage, things change. I always wonder about it, but I don't think so, because even 35-year-olds are expecting, right? You're very, so, you do believe that is starting to shift, as you said. And I think the more people that experience, I just think of BCGers I talked to were the first time they were vulnerable, the first time they gave up the mask. They said, my gosh, it was so freeing. I saved so much time. It wasn't being me. It was so hard. Now that leader just changed. And that's, one person at a time. Although you opened with, if you're not really treating the people right, they just leave. And it's pretty easy to leave nowadays. And the best, it's very easy to leave because someone said, well, Joe, but it's always someone else. Yeah, but you don't want the best to be rotating out of your company. I mean, you don't want anybody, but you don't want the best to be leaving your company for the next company.
Right.
That's not the path to success.
Yeah, there's I think there are generational differences. But I think of, one of the benefits of the younger generation to organizations is that they will leave if there's a problem. I think when it comes to a lot of Gen Xers and baby boomers, they are more likely than millennials and Gen Zers to stay at a job they don't like as opposed to leaving, but not do it well. Like just do it enough to just get by. And in a lot of circumstances, that's worse for an organization because you're not getting the canary in the coal mine of an exodus of people who are leaving where you can go, what's going on here? Let's react to this. You're thinking nobody's leaving. Everybody must be happy. And it's like, and when I ask them, they say they're happy. In the engagement survey, people say, yeah, everything's good. They're not being honest. They're not working hard anymore. Yeah. They've checked out. And now you have an even larger problem to solve, because you have people who you have to convince them to now, give their all. At least if the culture's bad and people are leaving, you have the ability to do a reset almost. You can figure this out and try to move through it. And so, yeah, this idea of not sticking around if you're having a problem, it's not good for companies. But it could be worse, and that is a team of people who are sticking around and just not doing well anymore.
Yeah, well, no, you're right. It's not good for companies, but maybe I think your other point there is it is actually good, because now you say, oh gosh, what's going on here, and what are we going to do, and what are we going to change?
I was taken back by one of the things you said in the book. You use the term "see the person, not the role" when it comes to speaking to somebody, and there's been a lot of work and discussion and movement over the last 3 or 4 years in the DE&I space in organizations, and a lot of it has been reactive. A lot of it has been this idea that, oh my gosh, we're going to be held accountable if we don't, and sometimes the right thing for the wrong reason is still the right thing. You hope it's the right thing for the right reason, but movement is movement. But this idea of seeing a person and not a role. It takes effort to do that if the person that you're seeing is not someone you can relate to. Either they are in a different point of their career as you, or they are, you're in the house and they're on the bed, when it comes to, the Zoom, the company conference call. If they are a different skin color than you, if they have kids and you don't, or you don't, or you do and they don't, if you don't listen to the same music, if you grew up in a completely different location or country, all these things can make the jumping off point of forming a relationship with somebody much more difficult. And human beings as animals, we want to we look for real easy things. It's this kind of quick, I want to strengthen numbers. I need to look around and find people who are like me, because that's where the strength lies. And there's so much that connects us in terms of our humanity that you can't see. And you just have to kind of dig below the surface. And I think the people who do that well are the ones that have the ability to see the person and not the role. And there are so many people out there who just don't make the effort, and they surround themselves with people who are like them, and they just take the kind of the easy way out. Much more difficult for leaders that I've seen. They really struggle with seeing the person and not the role. They see the role.
The thing I was just thinking about as you were talking, because it's a very tricky thing. I mean, I like people, I see people, but a 27-year-old isn't going to say, what's a 66-year-old? I just not going to. But, then you have to move past, okay, I'm not going to be that kid's friend. I mean, maybe we'll have a relationship, but I'm not going to be their friend. But if I see them in the work environment as the person, not the role. So what can this person bring? What are their experiences that are valuable? What do they know I don't know? Oh, they know 27-year-olds. What does that tell me about that set of customers of your business? And not make yourself think you have to know the 27-year-old in their world or them as your friend. At least it gives you a way to get there. Because as I was listening, I thought, wow, that's well put. And now what do you do? But you just look at them as someone can contribute to your company. You probably read in the story that was so stark for me. I used to do these deliberate discourse dinners, they were called, which was tables of 8 to 10. It was a facilitated conversation about when did you discover race. It was about race. And it was hopefully a collection, there might've been a LGBTQ woman, a regular old white 30-year-old male, a black guy, just a variety of people. We tried to get their variety of backgrounds. And one person looked up and he said, the black guy, maybe 5 years into BCG, he said, Joe, you don't get it. I wake up every day and I walk out the door and I'm worried I'm going to get shot. And I thought, shit. But this is what, and the thing in most of business, you need to be on most of the time. And a portion of this person's brain is on how am I going to live today? But it was really said to me, wow, I have to really spend more time seeing this person, not just the role. I mean, he was a very talented principal at BCG. Well, that's okay. But look what he's fighting through to make it work. Quite powerful. But ultimately, at least see what they can contribute in your organization. Like they just have different experiences, different thinking, different different just different thinking, different ways of seeing problems. And if you can understand, okay, that will actually contribute.
Sure. Well, in an organization like Boston Consulting Group or any of the organizations that do what BCG does, the nature of that is that you have to be able to be an effective consultant team for organizations, no matter where they are and no matter what type of clientele they have, no matter what type of employees they have. You have to be able to do that. If all you have working on your teams are people who are just like you, then I'm sure you'll have a core customer, right? But there's definitely going to be a ceiling that you can't go past where you're not going to be able to be appealing to other businesses because you just don't have the ability to walk in their shoes. You don't have the right people in place to do it. And so it's like I think the one of the things that we've learned over probably the last 30 years, but more so in the last 10 or 15, is that you don't do diversity, equity, and inclusion simply because it's the right thing to do. It's actually the smart business thing to do also, and it's not often that you don't have to choose between the two. Like in a lot of companies, you're having to choose between what you think is the right thing to do and the correct thing to do, right? And sometimes they don't always line up, or at least they don't fit right on top of each other. This one it really does, and it's the organizations that index really well on these metrics are the ones where it's just clear they understand that. They believe that they're not doing this in order to get points on their the ESG score. They're not doing it to not be chastised on social media by activist groups. They're doing it because they want to grow their business and they want to make more money, and this is the way they're doing it.
You're just there's study after study by the consulting firms, actually by the banks, by the hedge funds, even about oh look, when half the C-suite is women, the numbers are better. Right. There's just so much data that proves this. People call that a performative ally, someone who does it because, the metrics tell me to, or, my boss is going to look at the numbers. Versus, and that's, you can be an ally as a company too, versus, what I guess it's a word common, he's an action ally, who's someone who actually goes out of the way to help pave the opportunity for someone.
So why the word generous as opposed to something else? What was it about that word? Because I'll be honest, it seems basic. Like it seems like a pretty basic thing. It's not a profound word, but there's some power in that. There's some power in that. It's almost like don't overthink this. This is pretty basic. These things are not they're not necessarily easy to do, but you're not inventing fire here. You're telling somebody something that they probably should already know.
So can I give you a really honest answer?
Please, yes.
Of course, you're going to say yes. So it's very funny because originally I was working on this book with a hybrid publisher, and I had to come up with my own title, and it was different, driven. It kind of like Brené Brown's title, but I had something different, driven to care or something. So then I switched to BK, the affiliate of Penguin Random House, and they was on the phone with the video, Zoom all the time with two editors, and one guy goes, "Joe, your title's terrible." I said, "Okay," and I had been warned that editors know what they're doing, so basically take it. And he said, "You got to call it the generous leader." And he just got really excited. And then the other guy starts pounding on the computer. "Oh, it's not taken. It's not taken. Say yes right now." I just met these guys. I said, "Well, okay." I mean, they were screaming out, not screaming, but like, "Come on, it's the greatest word. It's so great." And then I said, "All right." Then I called him the next day. I said, "But wait a minute. What if people think I say I'm the generous leader?" He said, "Hey, you've been successful in business 40 years. Get used to it." I said, "Okay." But then to your point, it's just a much more encompassing word. And now I also got challenged. "Oh, you mean pay more money?" No, I didn't. You have to make sure that's not what I meant. But once you get that, I actually mean all the words you and I have talked about. Seeing the person, empathy, showing some vulnerability. I mean, really what it is giving of yourself without plan for gain so that others can grow and develop and thrive. And of course, when you do that, you benefit. If everybody's thriving, you're going to win too, it actually might even be easier because everybody else is doing so well around you. So I actually, the honest truth is they came up with it, but it's a very powerful word. And that's actually part of the goal is to get people to stop and, well, that's the whole goal, and maybe change their leadership a little bit. You see something like that, you say, "What's that?" You pause for a second. What's that all about?
I think the thing that I would like to know about it is what's the difference between, so that you in seven kind of bullet points here. You have
Yeah.
generous communication, generous listening, generous inclusion. What's the difference between good effective communication and generous communication, right? Like it implies that there's that the communication can be good and effective but not rise to the level of generous, right?
Yeah.
It implies that generous listening, that listening can be good and it can be effective, but not rise to the level of generous. What is that extra, sprinkling of the meme of the guy with the sprinkling of salt on the meat? What is that brings it to that level?
It's really that it's about them, not you, and about them first. So a generous listener, what do you know that I don't know that might help me out? What is your experience that you've had? Why are you saying what you're saying? As opposed to, let me tell you what you need to know to go do your job. The communicator, Joaquin Duato, CEO J&J, told a great story where he said, when I give a speech, I want it to connect with people. And what I do is I'll practice I'll get a group of less tenured employees, which is everybody, but for him, and I'll practice my talk, and then I'll ask them, what did they hear? And then I'll change and they heard, I said and they heard, or I said water, and they heard waterfall, whatever, and I'll use their words because that's actually going to resonate with them. I'm connecting with them, not connecting with and it allows them then to, hear the message and, grow and thrive, et cetera. But I think the big difference between when you say you jump to the generous, it's that your motivation is to inspire and motivate others to be as good as they can be, and not for your direct gain, or you're really you're trying to learn from them more than tell them.
I think about in places where feedback is effective as part of the culture of an organization. I've always believed you have to earn the right to give somebody feedback. And it has nothing to do with your title. It has to do with your relationship with them. And there are two types of people in my life. There are people who I've earned the right to give feedback to, and people who have not earned the right to give feedback to. There are people in my life that, like my brother is one of my closest friends, and if I did something that required feedback, the first words out of his mouth would have been something along the lines of, "What the hell are you thinking?" Right? Like things you wouldn't say to somebody you worked with, of course. But it's because of the relationship and the history. It means that I don't interpret him saying that to me as that he believes he's above me, or that he's trying to chastise me. It comes from a place of wanting me to get better or be a better person, and he has earned the right to say, "What the hell are you doing?" It's very rare that you could get to that level with a coworker, unless you've worked with them for many, 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 many years. But you still have to earn the right to give that feedback. And the places where I see feedback just fall on its face, are when people are giving feedback because what they're trying to solve is their own problem. Right. So it's like, I want to give you this feedback because what you're doing is making my life more difficult, and they don't say it that way. They don't say it that way. They try to put it in the words that make it seem like it would be better for their career and their job if they did it this way instead. But what they're really saying, and the person can read between the lines very easily, is, you're making my life more difficult and I'm trying to make that not happen. And feedback delivered from that place has already failed before you finish the sentence. And feedback delivered from a place where it's clear that whether or not this person does or does not change has no impact on me whatsoever, but I can tell that it will serve them well in their own career if they do things in a different way. If a person understands that, that's really powerful feedback. And all it takes then is for the person to get out of their own way and not have the ego to dismiss it.
Yeah.
But it starts with that. Are you thinking about the other person in what it is you're doing, or are you thinking about yourself?
The other word I use, but it's a tricky word, is, just what you just said, you have to care. I mean, your brother cares about you, and now you got to earn the right to, but if you don't care, it's a little hard to do a lot of these things, I don't quite know now, but you can get to different ways of caring. I mean, you made a point about they thrive, but I actually believe when they thrive, you as a leader thrive. That just is a fact. You're going to do better. And if you take no credit for it, oh, guess what? You're even going to do better. I believe that. So if there is a little bit of a if you need the self-serving nature to get yourself to move, oh, well, if everyone around me is knocking it out of the park, I'll get some credit for it. I had an interesting lesson. I went to the West Coast at BCG and had nice success. The West Coast kind of stuck at 100 million for, I don't know, like 3 or 4 years before I got there. We were 250 when I left. And it kept going year after year after year. And I remember the team that reviews your person each year, they looked and they said, oh, actually, all the people on the West Coast are performing better. It's not just like Joe's yelling at them to be better. They're actually performing. And they say, oh, so there's something going on here that's real, as opposed to somehow he's just selling everything himself or, kicking people hard. And now BCG is a pretty good place, but, we recognize immediately, oh, if you make everyone else around you better, the whole thing rises.
Well, it goes back to this idea of, working on behalf of others without expectation of something in return. And it works when it comes to effort and work and feedback and power. The most powerful people I know in terms of the actual influence they wield are the ones who not just don't ever care about gaining power, but at every turn they actively try to push away the power. It's incredible how much power people will give you once they realize you don't want it. And how much power people want to take away from you the moment they get the realization that that's what you wanted to begin with, was the power. And it's this kind of disarming of the relationship. People start to trust you with having the influence or the power over some aspect of their life, if they know that you're not going to do wrong with it. And the best way to know you're not going to do wrong with it is if you are reluctantly taking it to begin with, right? If you're doing it not because you want it, but because you want to see them succeed.
Well put. Well put. I don't have anything to add to that sentence.
So if a person is reading your book right now, what are you hoping that they get out of it? What are you hoping their takeaway is? They put the book down and they want to do different in their own organization as leaders. What do you hope they take away from it to be able to put into practice on their own teams?
Yeah, so I hope that someone recognizes when you help others thrive and grow and develop, actually everybody wins. For sure, they win, and that feels very good. You win because you're actually helping somebody grow. That's personally very good, and the organization gets to a different place. So actually, that's the first, because I just, it's not about you, it's about everybody. It's about them. And then I think the next, someone asked me one of the most important things. I do think there's kind of two. One is this whole idea of listen to learn, and what do they know that I don't? And really, because that's when you get huge unlocks. If you think you know it all, you're stuck. And that then means figure out your ways to be, authentic and vulnerable. That's a different line for everybody, because the minute you're a little vulnerable, that even admits, oh, I don't know what I don't know. What do you know, Chris, that I can learn from? That's a vulnerability too, which a lot of people don't have. So that's what I hope, is they understand, if you actually are spending, just like you said, the leaders that are giving the free intern development opportunities, trainings, that person's growing, that leader will benefit somewhere. That's what I hope people take away.
I hope so too. It almost rises to the level of everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten. We complicate things as adults, and we sometimes lose some of these things. I think we all start out having them, and they get unfortunately coached out of us along the way. But if we can kind of tap into them again, I think it can make for a real difference. And as more and more people do it, you get a cultural shift, not just in an organization, but in a workforce. Right? In a workforce where people start to realize what's possible. Once you realize what's possible, you're more likely to hold your own leadership accountable to delivering that, because you understand that, how come these people over here at this organization have they have the right to this type of leadership and I don't? Nope. You're gonna change, or I'm gonna go. And I think that's how you get cultural shifts. It's fantastic.
Well, yeah, if we really just think about our country today, if everyone stopped for a little bit and said, why do they think that way versus I think this way? You don't have to agree, but at least understand why they think it.
It's easier to not. It's easier to think that
you're right,
that they are the opponent, as opposed to thinking, hey, we're on the same team. The opponent is this problem that we're trying to solve, and you and I have different ways of our natural ways or inclinations of how to solve this problem are different, vastly different. But the opponent is the problem. The opponent is not you, and it's not me. We're in this together, and it's that has taken a back seat over the last, maybe decade.
Right.
And I really hope it comes back, because we can solve incredible problems if we start looking at each other as teammates as opposed to opponents. Joe, I want to thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. I think our listeners will get a lot out of this. We'll put a link to the book in the podcast description. I hope it continues to be successful, and that people learn some of the things that I've learned from it. It's a great book.
All right. Thank you very much.
You have a wonderful day today, Joe.
You too. Take care.